I'm sitting on maybe 30 or 40 finished books right now. The way we've created our system to work after 2008, unless you have 4 times the collateral of what you're trying to borrow,
Right.
no bank will give you any money to grow your business. So your only option is to raise money through the private market, which means going to those 3 groups of people: inherited wealth, tech, and Wall Street. And it's really hard to raise money from those 3 categories because a lot of the ego is at the wheel of the mindsets of those people. They're not about, hey, let's create something that would lift everybody else up, including ourselves. It's just all about, what can I brag about at dinner parties? It's not about, can we create a new system that's fairer, that's more artist friendly? Our royalty rate is double what the royalty rate is for other publishers, because we sell so many of the books direct. We can afford to actually do that.
Yeah.
And also, like, with the cost of this being so high, if the artists are at least getting 20 or 30% royalty, they're probably going to be getting like maybe a few $100 here and there. Whereas, once or twice a year, whereas with the 20 or 30% royalty, depending on the format, no one's going to get rich, but you might actually get a check for a few $1,000 once a year. And
Certainly
from
better
all
than Spotify.
From all your hard work. And, the major publishers, the way that it works is, I don't know one artist or author, other than someone already famous like Stephen King, that's ever made back their advance. So their model is based on giving an advance that they know will never be made back.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll send fuzzy math royalty statements for 20 years saying that the book's never recouped. Now, apparently Hollywood does this a lot with movies too. And I hate Limp Bizkit, one of the worst bands of all time, but apparently that band is suing, I think, Universal Music for like back royalties to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, because it was the same sort of the 90s deals were like that. You would get this advance, and then they would somehow come back and say somehow this has never recouped, even though they would have, gold records up in the office saying, well, this certified platinum, like, what do you mean we didn't make all the money back? And they would have this like kind of sliding scale accounting system. And that's kind of what happens. So like, ultimately I probably will end up having to go back and work for the major publishers, maybe by day, because I will eventually not be able to pay myself enough to do it. So, one of us, of Sybil and I, as a couple running this, will have to have the so-called day job again. We'll see what happens with the space. But there is no happy ending to starting something like this, because what happens is you have to put all the money back in, not pay yourself. And I think that's the misnomer that I think people have about entrepreneurialism in this country. Unless you already have money, our system after the '08 crash will not lend you the money. Right. I could have the best sales of any indie publisher on the West Coast, and very much do. And it doesn't matter. I've gone to small banks, big banks. The system is set up that unless you can show them that you own property or something that is worth 3 times as much as you're asking to borrow, they won't lend you the money. So there is no way to grow a business. You have no choice but to either scale it down and keep it super boutique, and you do it amongst your friends, or you go and find deeper pocketed investors, which I've seen with a lot of my friends. That's been the kiss of death. They grow too fast. The investor loses interest because they're not really committed to it anyways. And then the whole thing has to go under because they can't buy out the investor that they got that had deep pockets. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had the same team of backers since the beginning, all friends of mine who work in a different line of work and have a lot more access to money than I do, and were willing to lend it to me to start something like this. But I've even seen them kind of lose, not interest, but they're kind of shocked that despite us getting an enormous amount of press and selling more than $500,000 of books a year, it's still barely working, where no one's on salary, no one's getting health care. During COVID, we didn't get any PPP money because we didn't have W-2 employees.
Right.
They didn't have PPP money for freelance businesses. It was only people who had W-2 employees, which means most of those people were probably only making $10 or $12 or $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 at most, because you couldn't afford the payroll taxes any other way. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the schools pay shit too, is that, these blue states, like the one we're in, they haven't really made it look good to the other states in that they tax the shit out of everybody to the point where there's no really. I used to think when I moved here that the reason Hollywood paid everyone as freelancers was because they were, penny pinchers and misers, and there's probably some of that too. But really, it's because California's payroll taxes are so crazy. I remember we looked into it like a couple years into starting, because I did have a couple full-time employees initially. And in order to make them all employees and give them health care, including us, would have required us putting something like a third of the entire revenue of the company a year aside just to pay for those payroll taxes.
Wow.
And so you're like, well, how do you even do it if you're basically putting a third of the money aside just to pay the taxes? Then you have to manufacture the product, get it shipped here, distribute it, and then you get paid back from the fence when it sells. Like there's no like Venn diagram where that ends up having a happy ending. But I do think, to end on like a positive note, like I do think like Mighty Paw, for instance, like Gary Baseman and I have been friends for decades. Gary's a famous, illustrator and artist in LA. His mom worked at Cantor's for like 37 years. He grew up off, in the Fairfax district area. Gary has this insane following on social media, and that book's about his deceased cat Blackie.
I love the cover.
That book ends up like looking like a book from the 70s. If you take off the dust jacket, it has this really great foil stamping, on the cover. None of the big publishers would make the book now. They wouldn't do it. Cool. They wouldn't do it that way. They would just have the same cover printed on boards underneath the dust jacket, and they wouldn't do it that way. And we're trying to make at least the first editions of everything like a piece of art so that you collect it. And we have been lucky. Like this Slash book, this orange edition, the main ones were black and white covers, I think is like $500, and the regular edition is like $300 used. Wow. And a lot of the books we did in the first few years are now selling for 4 or 5 times as much as when they came out. I obviously wish that I had hoarded more of those copies so that we could then take advantage of that secondary market. But it's proof that some of this stuff does retain some value, and that not all books are just cheaply made widgets.
It's kind of like an acoustic instrument having more value than a lot of electronic ones.
Totally. Great analogy. Yeah, and just putting the extra care into the packaging itself so that it feels like it's not a widget and it's something that was made with love, Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't, like, for instance, Pulp, we did a cheaper iteration knowing that the young kids would probably, once there's a 25 quid edition of that book, all the kids under 30 are going to buy that one. Yeah. Whereas I don't have all the demographics in front of me, but certainly it was older millennials, Gen X, and I guess boomers, really going back to Pulp's beginnings in the late 70s, who were buying the hardcover that was $50, which is, I understand, cost prohibitive for a lot of people who are still living with their parents and aren't even like able to afford an apartment yet, let alone spend $50 or $60 on an art book. But what's nice is that I think there's almost 2 different audiences. Like the first edition pays for our ability to do a cheaper iteration, which then allows us to create something for the younger people that's more affordable. Yeah. And my hope is that with most of the books that become so-called evergreen titles, which is the book term for, I guess, what you'd call the back catalog at a record label. Right. There can be 2 iterations. And it doesn't have to be that once it's in paperback, it just stays in paperback. If it makes sense, we might continue to make hardcovers of the bigger Pulp book for the super fans who want the hardcover and will pay $20 extra for it. Right. And then make this more mass-produced one that could put in more stores because it's just more price point appropriate for stores. You'll notice it too in LA, like unless it's like, Skylight has that amazing arts annex that's the second location. It's all like graphic novels and art books. Right. And the music books are over there too. Most regular bookstores cannot afford to take in the types of product that we have. So like we're really only selling these books in about 100 shops. It's the museum stores that can afford books like this. There's, Arcana Books in Culver City that kind of specialize in the arts. So they have more of what you call art books or illustrated books as they're referred to in this industry. But there almost needs to be 2 different products. There's the like art book, coffee table book, and then there's like a cheaper iteration that's a soft cover that is what you would call a trade book. And that would be something then it would go into more stores like the Barnes & Noble, because those stores, a couple of the big Barnes & Noble stores in the LA area have a decent amount of art books. But if you go to the ones in other parts of the country, or even go to Orange County, they'll maybe have a few shelves of that stuff, and that's it. It's just that stuff's too cost prohibitive for their audience. And it's especially true in the UK. Like, I'm there a lot for work, and I noticed I did like 30 house calls when I was there in March. And I couldn't figure out why the pulp book wasn't selling in more of the retail shops. And that was what it was. They didn't have any books in the store over 40 pounds. And they maybe had one shelf of them. And they would have to be like really high end things. It'd be like Dolly Parton or, you know, something very specialized where maybe a super fan would come in and drop the $60 on it. So that's why there almost needs to be 2 iterations of the book in order for you to really generationally hit all of those audiences. Unless we have a complete role reversal and suddenly the Gen Z people actually start to make money and have the disposable income to buy this stuff. You know, we see it at the book fairs because we'll drop the prices by 20 or 30%, sometimes more. And that's when we see all the young kids come in. But that's also the Amazon effect, is they now think that the real price is 30 or 40% off what it really should be.
Right.
If everything is sold like that, the people who made it and the people who wrote the book make no money.
Yeah.
That's the rub of the Amazon effect, is that, yes, it's great for consumers. Yes, you know, planned obsolescence is a huge problem in the tech industry. You know, I just got a new phone over the weekend because mine was crapping out. I had no idea that the new iPhone only has a Thunderbolt cord. So now I have no chargers that work. I have no headphones that work, and I have to go and buy all this stuff again because they decided to change the input button. You know, it's only been a few years since I got the last one. So now all my headsets, all my chargers, everything that I have, all my backups, none of it will work.
Yeah, when I was still working at the school, when we do the live performances, I had like this doctor bag, and it had seriously like 50 different cords. So if somebody came up to play music with their phone, I could plug it into the sound system. You know, it's getting crazy. Before we go, I want to help you out. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. So where do people go online? You've got the website, and what social media are you on? Can you tell everybody how to find you?
Yeah, so our site is just hatandbeard.com. I mean, since we started, we've sold half of everything we've made directly to the fans.
Right.
I mean, that was almost like part of the financial necessity was, could we do it? And then once we saw that we could do it, could we maintain that and slowly take back what was taken from us by companies like Ingram and Amazon, where they've come in and created basically an extortion plot posing as wholesale distribution. One interesting, as far as an Instagram handle, that's really the only...
Let me just differentiate, though. So if they want to help you the most, go to the website.
Buy books directly from us. Come to a book fair. Come to any event that we do.
And you have one coming up really soon, right?
Yeah, there's a book fair this weekend in San Francisco. There's one almost every month now. And what's been so amazing is the original one, Printed Matter, was started by this great organization in New York dedicated to printed matter called Printed Matter. They have 2 stores. It's been going since the 80s. And those are like on a huge level. They're produced at a museum. There's 10, 20, 30,000 people coming through. But all of these other ones have started up in all these other cities organically by people in those cities organizing everybody to create these things. Right. I mean, it's all done in a grassroots level. There's a New England one. There's Vancouver. There's, you know, Chicago had one for a while. I'm hoping to rally some of my friends when I'm back there later this month.
Is your Instagram, though, the best way to find out about the events?
Yeah, so I was about to say Instagram is probably our best feed, at Hat and Beard Press, and it's all spelled out because they don't like ampersands in the age of social media. I think in the coming weeks, and this will be announced on Instagram, of course, we will have a weekly Substack, which will be what our newsletter used to do, but we're going to parcel it out in like once a week little blurbs and blasts about one particular thing. So rather than having a monthly roundup, we found that people almost might digest it more and just doing one thing and keeping it short. So we're going to start that. And then I think there will be a TikTok store by the fall where we'll start to use something like TikTok, because what we're seeing with Instagram was it was really great to sell our books for a while until TikTok came out. And now you can see it, just Facebook is trying to compete with TikTok. So they're pushing reels. They're not pushing organic posts.
Right.
Organic posting through the algorithm is not hitting most of the people anymore. They've created it so that it's a pay-to-play system.
Right.
And we noticed it with Pulp. Like, we did this kind of micro spending every week for like a couple of months. But it was almost infuriating because you're like spending $5,000 to make like $6,000. And wouldn't we rather give that money to set up more events on a grassroots level than lining Zuckerberg's pocket?
Right.
Using his, basic 21st century like surveillance capitalism advertising agency, which is what Facebook and Instagram have become.
Are you guys on Facebook too?
I think technically whatever's put on Instagram gets copied over to Facebook.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I have to say that's where Sybil and I are kind of like, we were proudly behind the scenes people most of our careers, and we didn't have to do that stuff, which was just this kind of, not that I don't think communication tools are great, but I always found all that stuff to be kind of shameless self-promotion. And we wanted the stuff to just sort of stand on its own. Now,
word of mouth, yeah.
Obviously that doesn't work now. You got to put yourself out there more. So in the coming months, I mean, we're going to have a YouTube channel too. I think I'm going to wait till we have the store so that we can have it be more diverse than me just ranting about stuff.
Right.
But a lot of other publishers have said, like, your knowledge about this stuff from having done this for so long, like if there was a YouTube channel where people could just go and find like a 3-minute video of how to not get fucked over by distributors, how to not like,
you should call it that.
How to not print stuff in totalitarian police states. Like, I don't have all the answers, but I would certainly be willing to impart whatever, useless knowledge I have about this stuff to other people. And I do sort of secretly do love YouTube, and that, like, it is something I use every day just because it's a great research tool. And I think that the technology is such that you see it with a lot of podcasts now. They've got a full live video feed.
Right.
A lot of people are watching the Joe Rogan show now. They're watching Podcast Save America. They're watching.
And then it all gets chopped up for TikTok and YouTube Shorts.
Yeah. And then, because they don't have as long of a, thing. So it's getting chopped up. So when we get this next round of money, I think we are going to kind of rethink our strategy, and that we are going to use a lot more of these tools to try to reach people.
For you, it's looking a little positive. You're going to open the place. People can have an experience, an immersion into what you do. And then if you get on to TikTok and YouTube Shorts, I think that's a good combination.
Yeah, I think it'll show people a part of the behind the scenes of just like how unglorious and how unsexy it is. I mean, it's mostly me looking like I'm a hoarder being surrounded by tons of stuff. And, we physically do all the mailings ourselves.
Yeah.
It is all done out of this house. It will be done out of this space again. And we'll have a little bit, but people come in, there's like a hired gun. We have an offsite storage space. Sometimes when the mailings are so overwhelming, we end up having to do them offsite because it's just, there's not enough room here to do it. The greatest thing that's happened, despite the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Bezos, is Amazon got in touch with us last year because we sold so much stuff through our Shopify account that they noticed that a lot of our books weren't available on Amazon and we weren't listing them through the distributor. And they were like, well, what would it take to get you on the platform? And it was a really easy answer. Stop price fixing the product.
Yeah.
And so
how did that go?
Well, we're in the midst of uploading all of our stuff this month.
Really?
We had to wait till June because that was when our contract sunsetted from the long-term distributor. In theory, in the next 2 weeks, all of our stuff goes up on Amazon. We have to do the fulfillment, but we're allowed to set the price. Not permanently, but for several years.
Wow.
We can reshuffle the deck. And this will allow our books to be more accessible to people who don't live in a major city, who can't go find it at like a Book Soup or something like that.
Yeah.
And also, I think even my most leftist friends, like, they get everything on Amazon. It's just how people are now. I'm not going to judge them. I tend to not buy stuff on Amazon if I can avoid it. If I can't find it anywhere else, sometimes I'll buy it. I know that I'm not the norm. So I think this could be a game changer for us because suddenly we're going to be getting 45% of the sale instead of 20%, which is more than double. Our distributor prior to the sunsetting of our deal was selling something like 80% of the books anyways through Amazon. So it wasn't like they were all that focused on indie stores to begin with. It was sort of like they would virtue signal on social media that they cared about that.
Yeah.
But the reality is Amazon controls the entire marketplace, and they have more or less since the Kindle came out, where they then they bought audible.com. So they have all of audiobooks. They own all of that. They own Abe Books, which was the consortium of book lovers that were selling books used online. It was an early online site. They own Abe Books. They own Goodreads, which was the message board for book lovers to organically post about books that they like.
Good God.
All of that's now run through Amazon's algorithm. And so whether I like Amazon or not, they're not going anywhere.
It's a reality.
Yeah, they have a studio. Amazon Music is up there, not maybe with Apple Music, but it's probably a close third after Spotify.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like these things are going to go away or they're and sort of, you know, they're going to get bored with this industry and move into something else. It's just swallowing up stuff. And so, you know, we've been conflicted actually about, do we even really promote that we're doing this stuff on Amazon, or we just say nothing and just see if if a ton of more people keep buying the stuff on Amazon, but then at least we get the money, which we can then put back into doing stuff, you know, the way that we have been doing it. And then that will actually free us up to be able to spend more time. I mean, my afternoon today is I physically write to all the indie bookstores in the entire country and convince them with one other sales rep to start buying from us. And typically I do have to eat probably $200 in books and the cost of shipping and the cost of that box to send them a care package. But once they see it, virtually no one has been like, hey, I'm not going to buy some of these books. Because they're not the same types of books that are produced by the big publishers.
Right.
It's not that they don't make good stuff. They do, but these are different and they're special and they should be special. And I should say, to give a prop to Brian Rodinger, who helped found Hat and Beard, both him and I come from a music background. He's probably one of the biggest music packagers like around nowadays. I mean, he's done Magna Carta Holy Grail. Today's the 12th anniversary of the design for that record for Jay-Z. He did the cover of Lady Gaga's record, did, you know, Mark Ronson, Florence and the Machine.
Wow.
But he started working for Dim Mak Records in the 90s, which was Steve Aoki's hardcore label. And, you know, Steve Aoki's dad started Benihana. And he put that money into a cool record label to document the hardcore scene in LA.
Yeah.
And Brian designed all those records, and then he had his own label, Handheld Heart. And he grew up with Randy Randall from Hyphenate and No Age. They grew up in Valencia together. So our No Age book, which I will also reprint for the 10th anniversary next year, is basically a graphic design history of the band, because Brian, up until maybe 2 albums ago, designed every 7-inch, every record, every poster, because they were just childhood friends. Brian and I come from a music background, and I think that's why a lot of people who work in publishing don't quite understand what our modus operandi is.
Right.
Because in a way, it is more rooted in record collecting. And if you remember Rhino Records in the 90s, when they would make like, you know, a big star box set or something, it would often have a book or booklet with it.
Right.
Except we're leading with the book, and now most of the music is just on one of these streaming platforms.
Yeah.
But, you know, with the Pulp book, a lot of people have written to me and said, wow, like flipping through the Pulp book, it's almost like I put on those records as I'm getting through, going through the book. So when we go through the His and Hers chapter, I listen to a couple songs from that record. We get to different class, I go back and listen to a couple of the B-sides from that record. And some of the books, I mean, our David Lynch book, which was the first book, was all about how David Lynch used music and film different than other directors.
Didn't even know about that one.
That one's called Beyond the Beyond. I don't think I'll be able to reprint it because there's just a lot of chaos going on, you know, because David died earlier this year and the estate's kind of a mess. I don't think it'll take us decades to rectify, but they gave me a hard no on reprinting the book. And it came with a CD, which now would seem almost absurd, but like 10 years ago, you know, a lot of computers still had CDs. A lot of cars still came standard with CDs.
Yep.
Now we'd probably do a drop card or something, and that would just be the digital download or whatever. Although someone told me the other day that those digital downloads that are in records don't really warrant much of a like success. It's like 10 or 20% of the people actually, you know, who bought the record are taking the card out and actually downloading the record. Part of it is they probably can just get access to it on these other platforms. But if they're buying the record, it's because they want the physical slab of vinyl, you know? The Loved One, which is the name that we're going to use for the bookshop and gallery and books and record shop space, is like, I think once that place opens, I think we'll be able to streamline everything we've been doing for the last 10 years in a new way that will allow us to create long-standing revenue streams that will actually help us build and grow the actual company versus having to play this shell game, which is what everyone with physical product does now, to just get it out to what's left of brick and mortar stores. I mean, Sybil and I, when we drive all this shit back here next month, we're going to bring all our gear.
Yeah.
Like we have a Fender Rhodes. I have a,
Oh, I used to have one of those. Nice.
I used to play in bands when I was younger. I mean, I wasn't super great.
What was your instrument?
I played guitar and bass and then keyboards, and the bass was through like distortion pedals. So it was almost played as a third guitar, which was kind of a thing in the 90s, using effects pedals on bass guitar.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of died down and has gone back.
Daisy Chainsaw. Remember they put the bass through the distortion?
Totally. Yeah. Girls Against Boys did that. Ned's Atomic Dustbin, My Bloody Valentine.
And Bauhaus,
Bauhaus.
Before everybody.
Yes. I was much better at bass because I had big hands than I was at playing guitar. So we're going to bring all our instruments back here and probably keep them at the space. You know, we have, the only thing we're missing is a drum set, which you have.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have like a couple of really good Fender P basses, and I have a Jazzmaster and a Telecaster. But if the indie stores aren't willing to buy from us directly, then they're not really supporting independent publishers.
Yeah.
You know, and I've noticed a lot of the bookstores that have started since COVID, for instance, in upstate New York, there's a lot more bookstores, and it's great that they've been founded. But when I'm on the phone with the owners, they'll be like, wow, like, if we're not getting these books with like a zillion days to pay and the ability to return whatever we want and 50% off and free shipping, we won't even buy the stuff. In other words, like, they're only buying it because they're getting these loosey-goosey terms that make absolutely no financial sense for the publisher and the author whatsoever. Yet this has become the new industry standard.
Yeah.
And they'll blame it all on Amazon too. They'll say, well, if Amazon hadn't have undermined everything, we wouldn't be at this point. But it's almost like saying 18 wrongs makes a right. No, like, you're going to destroy all of the indie publishing if there's no way to effectively sell your books in this country. And, you know, there's a couple distributors that I won't name beyond Ingram that, you know, we worked with previous to that. And they know that they're offering something that is 100% underwater.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they just, it's like they don't want to talk about it because they feel awful about it, but that's just the way it is. And I'm not in the record business, but I've heard that that's kind of left, you know, other than the secretly Canadian consortium and a few like smaller things that have existed since the college rock days of the 80s, like Revolver and Forced Exposure, that are still selling records to indie shops the old fashioned way, that it's very much the same terms now too. Well, I remember when we started, I called all these record labels and I said, okay, you know, Drag City was a place that I had worked, and I was like, okay, a lot of your bands are now LA bands, Ty Segall, you know, Joanna Newsom, No Age. So you go into a store, record's $30. Of that, what's going to you guys and the the artist? And it was something like $2 or $3.
Oh my God.
So it's like a $30 record after manufacturing plus the wholesale and retail cut. And then even if it's a 50-50 split with the musicians, they're splitting like $1.50 each.
And $30 is a lot for somebody to spend on an album anyway, when a lot of these kids grew up hearing music for free.
Totally. And you see it now. Like, I've become kind of astute at going to places like Amoeba that obviously have new and used. And if you just don't want it the week it comes out, you just have to wait a couple weeks and there'll be a used copy for $15 or $20 less in the new arrivals bin, so that you're not paying the full $30. Because again, I have no problem paying. It's just that when you realize none of it's going to the people who actually make the record. Yeah. And it's like that with books too. That trial that happened between Random House and trying to buy Simon & Schuster, most people didn't spend the $100 to get this trial book. But it's revelatory because in that trial, because they called all these big authors, including Stephen King, to the stand, all these authors who obviously stand to gain a lot from that were vehemently against it because they're right. Like, maybe Stephen King and Joyce Carol Oates and Margaret Atwood are the people who are selling millions of books and are household names. But if everything's consolidated, there won't be mid-list authors. There won't be emerging authors because it'll be too risky for those publishers to ever take the risk. So then everything will just be about what's already established or what is trending on social media.
Right.
Like, I can't tell you how many books I've seen made that shouldn't have even been a book, but just because they happen to be good on Instagram and they were covering one particular genre of something, then a book was created because of that, as opposed to it being a good idea. And I think a lot of that is a knee-jerk reaction to these kind of new platforms as they come out. And TikTok is the most recent one. Like, there was no TikTok store 3 years ago, or BookTok, or any of these things that are now trending.
Yeah.
Instagram has moved away from what it was originally intended for, which was to post visual culture stuff organically. Yeah. You know, in the beginning, Instagram was revelatory for us, but you started to see it once they started to compete with TikTok, where it was all about the reels. So now we're probably going to have to start creating these reels, because we have 15,000 followers, but I don't think most of our posts are even finding those people, because we got those 15,000 followers organically, which is by spending tons of time on the platform. Yet we're not seeing the likes go up or the comments go up. And that's because they're disenfranchising the actual organic followers, because they want you to pay extra for the sponsored ads.
And that might not even work.
Kind of, if you watch Social Network, which I know is a fictionalization of the founding of Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much of it was real, because I don't really care about Facebook, but there's a line in the movie where it's like, ads aren't cool. We're not going to have ads. It didn't take Zuckerberg long to basically turn it into a data mining advertising agency. And all these things kind of become the antithesis of what they were created for.
All right, JC Gabel, thank you so much for talking to me today. I think it's been one of the most fascinating and informative interviews I've ever done. And would you be willing to talk some more in the future?
Of course. Thank you for your time today, Malcolm. Thank you for your interest in what we're doing.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for creating a conversation podcast with creative people to talk about what's really happening, as opposed to sort of, you know, the sanitized version of kind of what gets out there these days, where, you know, everything is kind of celebrity drenched, and, you know, most of the podcasts that are made are really only designed around someone's celebrity. Yeah. And when that's not really what the medium was originally created for either. I mean, Mark Maron was a comedian, but he wasn't as well known as he became after the podcast.
Yeah.
You know? And it was through his interest in music and cool stuff that I think, you know, that led to the domino effect. I can see too why he kind of threw in the towel, because there's so much competition now. Like, he's got a huge archive, and also he kind of was one of the pioneers, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of up to us to use these mediums to our advantage to find our tribes, which is, you know, I think kind of when we first started talking before you hit record, this notion is a good way to sum up today of like, you found your tribe by looking at the liner notes and the thanks lists of bands, and that's how you found out about other bands. And then you would meet people at shows that maybe went to a different school, but, you know, there wasn't the internet to connect everybody. So this is how you found your tribe, was through music and underground film and underground literature. And yes, the internet is great, and it's connected all these people in all these different ways. But in some ways, I think that's been the biggest thing lost, is trying to connect to the people who are your actual tribe.
Yeah, the human connection.
It's hard to do that, because there's so much chaos on the internet, and there's so much unfiltered stuff being put up all the time, that it's almost missing that sort of hyper connectivity that happens in smaller venues or amongst people meeting in person, which is why I'm glad that we have things like the book fairs and, you know, us opening this physical shop. Yes, it's going to be very hard to make a physical bookshop and record shop work in the 21st century, but I do have faith in my fellow brothers and sisters. And I think, you know, we're going to be able to, you know, find a way through this. I mean, I think good things will always prevail. It may not be something we can all make a living off of anymore, but that's fine. You know, as long as we're doing it and we're enjoying ourselves and we're connecting with the right people, that's what's really important.
Yeah, man. Creativity is going to save us all. And I hope there's more people like you out there, people like Jack White, that are really trying to make the world a better place and keep taking care of people in our country, and people like Noah Weil that are doing shows like The Pit and trying to bring business back to Hollywood and stuff like that, man. We got to stay positive.
Absolutely. The only thing that's going to get us through this is positivity, which is very hard to be positive about much these days, but we're going to do it.
You're doing it though, man. You're doing it.
Thank you, Malcolm.
All right. Thanks, JC.
Later, brother.
Thanks for listening. Over. Under. Out.
The cuts are nuts.